The envelope arrived folded in half, damp from the November rain, with an $8,000 offer typed in clean corporate lettering. Eli Mercer read it twice at the kitchen table while the tea kettle hissed softly behind him. Outside, the pasture fence leaned under the wind exactly the way it had when his father still ran cattle there in 1978. The corporation's representatives called the land non-essential acreage. They spoke politely. Confidently. What they didn't know was that 12 miles of dry county land depended on a buried water easement recorded in a courthouse basement nobody had opened in 43 years. Eli Mercer lived alone on 82 acres outside Blackwater County, where the roads narrowed into gravel and most fences carried more history than value. The farmhouse sat low beside a dry creek bed lined with cottonwoods. Every morning started the same way, coffee grounds measured carefully into an old metal pot, notebook opened beside the window, weather recorded in neat handwriting. Wind direction. Soil moisture. Livestock prices from the radio. The corporation arrived on a Tuesday morning in 3 white SUVs. Their logo, Silver Peak Development Group, was printed across the doors in dark blue lettering. They parked beside the rusted cattle gate as if they already owned the road leading to it. 2 men stepped out wearing pressed jackets too clean for county dirt. Eli watched them from the porch without greeting. The younger man introduced himself first. Daniel Reeves. Land Acquisitions. He carried a leather folder beneath his arm. We're assembling parcels for the reservoir expansion project, he said. Regional infrastructure. Eli nodded once. The older executive smiled politely and handed him the envelope. $8,000. Final preliminary offer. Not negotiation. Offer. The number itself almost felt intentional. Not enough to insult a wealthy man. Just enough to dismiss a poor one. Daniel explained the corporation had already secured surrounding properties. Environmental approval was progressing. County support was strong. The tone remained soft, rehearsed, procedural. Eli asked only one question. What happens if I don't sell? The older executive gave a small smile. Eventually, eminent domain discussions begin. Silence settled across the porch. A screen door creaked somewhere inside the house. The tea kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. Eli looked at the offer again. His thumb rested briefly over the company seal. Then he folded the paper once. Neatly. You drove all the way out here for this? Daniel exchanged a glance with the older man. It's fair market value. Eli nodded slowly, almost thoughtfully. That's so. Nothing in his voice rose. No anger. No protest. Which somehow unsettled them more. The younger executive began explaining development timelines, pipeline routes, construction phases. But Eli's attention had already shifted toward the old cedar cabinet near the doorway. Inside it sat 30 years of county surveys. Handwritten notebooks. Water records. Receipts. Things his father never threw away. The executives eventually left after repeating that the offer would expire in 10 business days. Their SUVs disappeared down the gravel road trailing pale dust behind them. Eli remained on the porch long after the sound faded. Then he went inside, turned off the kettle, and unlocked the cedar cabinet for the first time in nearly 6 years. Near the bottom drawer sat a folded county map dated August 1977. A red line crossed directly beneath Silver Peak's proposed reservoir site. Eli stared at it quietly. Then he reached for his father's old reading glasses. Eli begins investigating the forgotten water access agreement connected to his land. The courthouse basement smelled like wet cardboard and iron dust. Eli had not been down there since accompanying his father to tax hearings in the early 80s, back when county clerks still smoked beside filing cabinets and every deed was stamped by hand. The building itself had barely changed. Same cracked tile floors. Same humming fluorescent lights. Same coffee stains on the public research tables near the archives room. Mary Ann Holt still worked records. She recognized Eli immediately. Haven't seen you down here in years. Needed to look at old surveys. Civil or agricultural? Agricultural water access. That answer made her pause slightly. Most people came searching for mineral rights, unpaid taxes, inheritance disputes. Water records were different. Older. Messier. She handed him a pair of cotton gloves and pointed toward the lower archive shelves. Boxes from the 70s are mostly untouched. Eli spent 3 hours opening faded county files while rain tapped steadily against the basement windows. Survey maps curled at the corners. Easement agreements rested inside brittle manila folders held together by rusted clips. By noon, he found the first inconsistency. Silver Peak's reservoir expansion map showed pipeline access crossing 6 surrounding parcels, but not his. That made no sense. Every natural spring within 12 miles had dried decades ago except one. Mercer Spring. His father used to call it the hidden creek under the hill. Eli unfolded another survey map dated 1978. Then another. Finally, he located a folded engineering document stamped with the seal of Blackwater Agricultural Commission. His fingers stopped moving. There it was. A handwritten notation near the bottom margin. Primary Water Access Corridor, Permanent County Easement. The corridor crossed directly through Mercer land. Not adjacent to it. Through it. Eli leaned back slowly in the chair. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. He read the document again more carefully. In 1978, during a regional drought crisis, the county had approved emergency underground water routing through Mercer Spring to supply neighboring farmland. Temporary agreements eventually became permanent infrastructure protections after federal agricultural funding became involved. The key detail sat buried near the final paragraph. Any obstruction or transfer affecting the corridor required direct county review and continuity guarantees for agricultural supply zones. Silver Peak's reservoir site depended on that corridor. Without it, their expansion stalled immediately. Eli removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose quietly. For the first time since the executives arrived, the shape of the situation became visible. They hadn't overlooked his land. They had misunderstood it. There was a difference. Marianne passed by carrying old ledger books. You find what you needed? Maybe. She looked at the open documents. That old water corridor caused lawsuits years ago. Eli looked up. What kind? Farm closures. Irrigation disputes. County nearly lost federal grants over it. She lowered her voice slightly. My advice? Make copies before somebody realizes those files matter again. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Eli stood beside the courthouse copy machine feeding survey maps through one page at a time. Each photocopy slid out slowly beneath the dim fluorescent light. County easement. Agricultural continuity clause. Protected access corridor. One by one. By evening, a thick folder rested beneath his arm. As he walked toward the parking lot, his phone vibrated for the first time all day. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Daniel Reeves' voice came through calmly. Mr. Mercer, Silver Peak is prepared to increase the offer. Eli looked back toward the courthouse windows. Then toward the folder in his hand. How much? A brief pause. 12,000. Eli almost smiled. Almost. The corporation escalates pressure while Eli uncovers deeper documentation tying the county to the easement. The feed store sat beside the highway outside Blackwater like it had been forgotten by time. Faded tractor calendars hung crooked near the register. A ceiling fan pushed warm air in slow circles overhead. Farmers gathered there before sunrise for coffee served from a steel pot older than most of the pickup trucks outside. Eli arrived just after 6. Nobody asked why. People in Blackwater understood silence better than conversation. He carried the copied courthouse records inside a weathered legal folder and sat alone near the window booth where his father used to balance invoices after cattle auctions. The same waitress still worked mornings. Donna. Gray hair pinned tightly behind her head. Coffee? Eli nodded once. She filled the mug without speaking further. Outside, Grain trucks rolled past toward the interstate construction zone Silver Peak had been promoting for months. County officials called it economic expansion, jobs, growth, reservoir modernization. But now Eli noticed something different. Every infrastructure map pointed toward Mercer Spring. Not directly. Carefully. Indirectly. Like someone trying not to mention the real dependency. He opened his father's old notebook beside the coffee cup. Brown leather cover. Water stains along the edges. Inside were decades of small observations written in narrow handwriting. Pipeline pressure changes. County inspection dates. Survey marker adjustments. Then, near the middle pages, a sentence underlined twice in blue ink. Never surrender spring access without federal review. Eli stared at the line for a long moment. Below it sat another note dated September 14, 1981. County lawyer warned them corridor clause stronger than they admit. No explanation followed. Just that sentence. A memory returned slowly. His father arguing quietly with two men beside the barn one summer evening. Folded papers spread across the hood of a truck. Voices low. Controlled. Serious enough that Eli's mother kept him inside the house. At the time, he thought it was about cattle permits. Now he understood differently. By noon, Silver Peak's pressure became public. A notice appeared in the county paper announcing pending regional acquisition cooperation connected to reservoir expansion. Eli's property was described as inactive agricultural land delaying critical development. Inactive. The word traveled fast. By afternoon, two neighboring ranchers stopped by his fence line asking if he planned to hold things up. Neither sounded hostile. Mostly worried. Construction contracts meant money for struggling farms. Silver Peak understood exactly how to isolate resistance. That evening, Eli drove north to the old agricultural extension office near Mason Creek. The building was nearly abandoned now, used mostly for storage. Dust covered the windows. Filing cabinets lined the walls like sealed tombs. An elderly clerk named Vernon still managed county archives twice a week. When Eli mentioned Mercer Spring, Vernon frowned immediately. Haven't heard that name in years. I'm trying to locate federal agricultural records tied to the water corridor. Vernon removed his glasses slowly. That corridor caused panic back in '78. What kind of panic? The kind involving Washington. He disappeared into the back room and returned carrying a narrow storage box sealed with brittle tape. Inside rested correspondence between county officials and federal agricultural agencies during the drought emergency. Most pages were routine. Then Eli found the letter. Typed on federal letterhead. The final paragraph stopped him cold. Protected water continuity access may not be obstructed by private commercial development under federal agricultural preservation statutes. Eli read it twice. Then 3 times. Silver Peak didn't just have a negotiation problem. They had a federal compliance problem. And judging by their confidence, they didn't know it yet. Eli quietly forces the corporation into a public legal vulnerability. 3 days later, Blackwater County Hall filled before sunrise. Pickup trucks lined both sides of Main Street. Contractors in reflective jackets stood beside ranchers wearing mud-covered boots. Local reporters gathered near the courthouse steps with notepads tucked beneath their arms. Silver Peak had scheduled a public infrastructure briefing to finalize support for the reservoir expansion project. Eli arrived alone carrying a plain cardboard file box. No lawyer. No speech prepared. Just documents. Inside the meeting chamber, county supervisors sat behind a long oak bench polished by decades of hearings and budget disputes. Silver Peak representatives occupied the front rows wearing dark suits that contrasted sharply against the worn wooden floors. Daniel Reeves noticed Eli immediately. His expression tightened for only half a second. Then professionalism returned. The presentation began with charts and projected growth estimates. Water security. Employment opportunities. Regional investment. The executive spoke with practiced calm while diagrams flashed across a portable screen near the podium. Everything sounded polished. Certain. Then the county supervisor opened the floor for final procedural questions. Silence held briefly. Eli stood slowly from the back row. Every head in the chamber turned. He carried the cardboard box forward without urgency and placed it gently on the evidence table near the supervisors. Daniel watched carefully now. Eli removed a single folded survey map first. Then a photocopied easement agreement. Then the federal letter from 1981. The room remained quiet except for paper sliding across wood. Finally, Eli spoke. "You marked my land as inactive acreage." One supervisor adjusted his glasses. "That is the current designation." Eli nodded once. Then he unfolded the 1978 corridor survey across the table. "No, sir," he said calmly. "It isn't." The supervisor leaned forward. Daniel's posture changed almost immediately. "What exactly are we looking at?" one official asked. Eli pointed toward the red survey line crossing beneath the reservoir access route. "Protected Agricultural Water Continuity Corridor." Murmurs spread quietly through the chamber. Another supervisor picked up the federal correspondence and read the highlighted paragraph twice before looking toward Silver Peak's legal advisor seated near the aisle. The attorney's face lost color gradually. Not dramatically. Just enough. Daniel interrupted carefully. "Our compliance team reviewed all county infrastructure obligations." Eli reached into the box again and removed his father's notebook. Worn leather. Water-stained. Pages filled with inspection references and maintenance logs spanning nearly 20 years. Then your team missed the corridor inspection records tied to Mercer Spring. The room fell still again. One county official asked the question nobody from Silver Peak wanted spoken aloud. "If this corridor remains federally protected, can construction legally proceed?" Silver Peak's attorney answered too slowly. "We would need further review." There it was. Not denial. Delay. And everyone in the room heard the difference. Outside the courthouse windows, rain clouds gathered low above the hills. The fluorescent lights flickered softly overhead while supervisors reviewed the documents one by one. Daniel finally approached Eli directly. Quietly. Away from reporters. "You could have brought this to us privately." Eli looked at him for a long moment. "You came to my porch privately." Daniel lowered his voice further. "We can resolve this." Eli glanced toward the evidence table where county officials continued examining the records. "That depends," he said, "on how much your project needs water." For the first time since arriving in Blackwater County, Daniel Reeves had no immediate answer. By evening, the county postponed final approval pending emergency legal review. Construction contractors began leaving town before sunset. And inside Silver Peak's regional office 3 counties away, executives finally opened files they should have examined months earlier. What they discovered kept the lights on all night. Eli gains leverage through patience as deeper legal exposure emerges. By Monday morning, Silver Peak's tone had changed completely. The new envelope arrived by courier instead of regular mail. No corporate logo on the outside this time. Inside sat a revised acquisition proposal offering $90,000 for the Mercer property, immediate relocation assistance, and confidential settlement terms. The language was careful now. Respectful. Entire paragraphs had been rewritten by attorneys trying to sound cooperative instead of certain. Eli read the documents at the same kitchen table where the original $8,000 offer had first rested beneath the tea kettle's steam. Outside, frost covered the pasture grass silver-white beneath the sunrise. He folded the papers once and placed them beneath his father's notebook without signing anything. At 10:30, Daniel Reeves arrived alone. No SUVs. No legal team. Just a rented pickup truck dusted with highway salt. Eli watched him from the porch before opening the screen door. "You drove yourself this time." Daniel managed a tired smile. "Figured it might help." He looked different now. Less polished. The confidence remained, but the certainty underneath it had begun cracking around the edges. Inside the house, the kettle hissed softly while Daniel laid additional folders across the kitchen table. Environmental compensation studies. Alternative access proposals. Private mediation agreements. Silver Peak was moving fast now, trying to solve the problem before state regulators became involved. You understand what happens if this escalates publicly, Daniel said carefully. Projects stall. Funding disappears. People lose jobs. Eli poured coffee into 2 mismatched cups. County nearly lost farms over that corridor once already. Daniel exhaled slowly. That was 40 years ago. Water's older than both of us. Silence settled between them. The old clock near the refrigerator ticked steadily while wind pushed against the windows. Finally Daniel opened a separate folder. 1.2 million. The number hung quietly in the room. For the first time, the offer reflected reality. Not land value. Dependency value. Eli didn't react immediately. Instead, he walked toward the cedar cabinet and removed another stack of county maintenance receipts tied together with faded string. Pipeline inspections. Emergency repairs. Access permits signed by county engineers throughout the 80s and 90s. He placed them beside the settlement folder. Daniel's expression tightened again. There's more. Eli nodded once. Your reservoir rerouting plan crosses federal agricultural continuity zones in 3 directions. Daniel stared at him carefully now, as though seeing him clearly for the first time. How long have you known? Eli considered the question honestly. Since the courthouse basement. And you waited. I wanted to be certain. That answer unsettled Daniel more than anger would have. Because patience meant preparation. And preparation meant the trap had already closed before Silver Peak realized there was one. Late that afternoon, state environmental reviewers contacted the county requesting immediate suspension of all preliminary excavation permits connected to the project. Someone inside the supervisor's office had forwarded copies of the federal correspondence. By evening, regional news stations began asking questions about protected agricultural water infrastructure. Silver Peak stock dipped 2% overnight. Inside their headquarters, executives argued behind closed conference room doors while compliance teams searched decades of neglected land records. Outside legal consultants were flown in from Chicago and Denver. Emergency calls continued past midnight. And through all of it, Eli Mercer remained exactly where he had always been. At the kitchen table. Coffee cooling beside him. Notebook open. Waiting quietly while the corporation finally understood the difference between owning land and needing it. The final meeting took place in January beneath the pale fluorescent lights of the Blackwater County Mediation Office. Snow rested along the courthouse gutters outside. Meltwater dripped steadily from the roof onto frozen concrete while county employees carried stacks of legal folders between offices without speaking much above a whisper. Inside Conference Room 3, Silver Peak's executive team looked exhausted. Not defeated. But close enough to recognize caution. 3 attorneys sat along one side of the table beside environmental consultants and infrastructure planners. Daniel Reeves occupied the far end near the window, his tie loosened slightly for the first time since Eli had met him. Across from them sat Eli Mercer alone. Same brown coat. Same worn notebook. Same calm expression. The mediation officer reviewed the updated findings quietly. Federal agricultural protections tied to Mercer Spring remained enforceable under continuity preservation statutes. Multiple state agencies had suspended approval reviews pending full compliance investigations. Any attempt to proceed without corridor restructuring could expose Silver Peak to years of litigation and federal penalties. The room stayed silent after she finished. Everyone already understood the situation. Silver Peak's lead attorney slid a final settlement packet across the table. $6.8 million. Full property acquisition. Lifetime royalties on regional water usage access. Confidentiality protections. The kind of offer corporations make only after discovering how expensive arrogance becomes. Eli opened the folder carefully. Then closed it again. Daniel studied him closely. "What do you want, Mr. Mercer?" The question sounded genuine now. Not procedural. Eli rested both hands on the notebook. "My father signed temporary access agreements during the drought because neighboring farms were dying." Nobody interrupted. "He spent 20 years making sure the county protected the corridor after developers tried rerouting groundwater for private projects." Eli slid a single handwritten page across the table. Not a demand letter. A conditions list. No reservoir construction could reduce agricultural flow capacity. Independent county oversight would remain permanent. A percentage of water revenues would fund drought protection grants for local farms. And Mercer Spring itself would never become private corporate property. One attorney frowned immediately. These conditions would require structural revisions to the project. "Yes," Eli said calmly. Another silence followed. Longer this time. Because everyone in the room understood the truth at once. Eli Mercer had never been trying to destroy the project. He had been forcing it to respect the thing underneath it. Water. Land. History. Responsibility. Daniel finally leaned back in his chair. Then, slowly, he nodded. "We can work with this." The tension in the room shifted almost invisibly after that. Not victory exactly. Acceptance. Outside, courthouse bells marked noon while snow drifted lightly across Main Street. The legal teams began revising documents immediately. County supervisors prepared emergency oversight motions. Reporters waited downstairs hoping for scandal, lawsuits, public collapse. Instead, the agreement became something quieter. Harder to sensationalize. A corporation forced into accountability by records it failed to respect. 2 weeks later, construction resumed under revised environmental protections and public county oversight. The newspaper called it a historic cooperative settlement. But around Blackwater County, people described it differently. They said Silver Peak tried buying a piece of land from an old rancher. And discovered too late that the old rancher understood the county better than they did. One cold evening near the end of winter, Eli returned the original $8,000 offer to the cedar cabinet beside his father's notebook and a faded 1978 survey map. Then he closed the drawer quietly. Outside, beneath frozen pasture grass and 12 miles of dry county soil, the water kept moving. Spring arrived slowly across Blackwater County. Snowmelt collected in roadside ditches. Fence posts emerged from thawing ground one by one. The reservoir construction resumed under stricter county oversight while new water monitoring stations appeared along the agricultural corridor Silver Peak once planned to reroute quietly beneath the hills. People still talked about the Mercer settlement at the feed store every morning. Mostly in fragments. Corporation never checked the old filings. He had records going back 40 years. They offered $8,000 first. Nobody exaggerated the story much. In Blackwater, restraint carried more weight than spectacle. Eli kept to the same routines after everything ended. Coffee before sunrise. Weather notes in the notebook. Repairs around the north fence line. The money changed certain things slowly. The farmhouse roof was replaced before summer storms arrived. Rusted irrigation pumps near the lower pasture were rebuilt. 2 neighboring ranchers quietly received drought assistance grants funded through the revised county agreement. Eli never mentioned that part publicly. One afternoon in late April, Mary Ann Holt from the courthouse stopped by carrying a narrow archival box beneath her arm. "Found something during catalog transfer," she said. Inside rested older county correspondence tied to Mercer Spring. Most pages were routine maintenance reports and federal routing approvals. Then Eli found a sealed envelope addressed in his father's handwriting. "Open only if they come back for the water." The paper inside had yellowed with age. Eli unfolded it carefully. The letter was short. "Your grandfather fought the rail company for this corridor in 1931. They tried rerouting spring access through private holding fields during the drought years. County nearly lost half its farms before the injunction stopped them. Water makes decent men greedy faster than oil ever did. If somebody comes again, make them remember who the land feeds first." No signature. Just initials at the bottom. T.M. Thomas Mercer. Eli sat quietly for a long time after reading it. Outside the kitchen window, evening light settled across the pasture in long golden bands while wind moved softly through the cottonwood trees near the creek bed. The tea kettle began whistling again. Same sound. Same kitchen. Different silence now. Later that evening, Eli walked toward the spring access gate carrying the old 1978 survey map folded beneath his arm. Construction crews worked far beyond the hills now, their machines reduced to distant shapes against the horizon. But Mercer Spring remained untouched. Clear water moved steadily beneath the grates exactly as it had for generations. Eli knelt beside the access marker and brushed dirt from the rusted county plate bolted into the concrete. Protected agricultural continuity corridor. Still there. Still binding. For a moment, he imagined his father standing beside him again holding the notebook under one arm, watching quietly while another corporation learned the same lesson the railroad companies learned decades earlier. Some things on paper looked small. Until someone tried removing them. Eli folded the map carefully and walked back toward the farmhouse as darkness settled over Blackwater County. Behind him, beneath 12 miles of land nobody fully understood until it was nearly too late. The water kept moving.